Alright, so today we're doing something a little bit different. I mentioned in my channel announcement from the beginning of the week that I had the idea for a theory about the new Star Trek series, Star Trek Picard, which I have talked about on the channel a little bit before. And considering how hard CBS came down on that video, like they still haven't completely let go of it, I'm not going to be able to use any clips from Picard in this video. I'll include screen caps of characters, so you'll know who I'm talking about in case you've watched the show but haven't really been paying attention to people's names and stuff. And also of characters that I mentioned from previous Star Trek series as well. But no clips in this one. I apologize for that. It's going to make this video super boring to watch because it's going to be mostly my dumb face. That said, and I don't know for sure that the title of this video hasn't spoiled the point of the video already because I haven't thought of the title yet. We're going to be talking about a theory regarding how I think the Romulans were able to reprogram a bunch of androids similar to Commander Data from the Next Generation, but significantly less sophisticated. These androids weren't even sentient. To hijack a bunch of ships and destroy the Utopia Planitia shipyards above Mars. A very important location in the Star Trek canon. One which had a lot of people at it, and which, without it, Starfleet has lost a significant portion of their production base. They also attacked the planet itself, and apparently it's still on fire, like 14 years later, which really sucks. And I mentioned that the Romulans did this, even though we don't have concrete confirmation of that in the show yet, because there's really no other direction that it could go. Even if we found out that somebody in Starfleet was the one who reprogrammed those, they call them synths, and that's going to throw me off unless I start calling them synths too. Even if we find out it was somebody in Starfleet who reprogrammed the synths to commit this terrible crime, I'm 100% sure that the Romulans will somehow be behind it, since we now know, as of, not the most recent episode, but one of the more recent episodes of Picard, that the Romulans have agents in Starfleet and probably the larger Federation as a whole. It also seems, and I don't know why this would be the case, but it also seems that the Romulans didn't want Starfleet to help them evacuate when their planet and most of their outlying territories, it seems, even were destroyed by a catastrophic supernova, which proves that the people who wrote the original J.J. Abrams Star Trek reboot movie didn't know what a supernova was. Point is, the attack by the synths not only got synthetic life forms, which means any AI intelligent enough to be, or possibly be sentient, banned in the Federation, it also hurt the Federation enough that they pulled back from helping the Romulans, like 100%. They were already on the fence about it, but that kind of sealed the deal. They needed to deal with stuff at home. And there was some nuance to the whole situation. Other Federation member worlds were so uncomfortable with Starfleet helping the Romulans, a noted enemy of the Federation for, decades and decades, that they were threatening to withdraw from Federation membership if the aid mission went through. But even that could have been orchestrated by the Romulans. They could have fingers that deep into the Federation that they could influence people to issue those ultimatums. The Romulan Special Forces, the Tal Shiar, are incredibly intelligent, incredibly skilled at understanding how to manipulate people, and incredibly far-reaching, even today when the Romulan Empire doesn't even really exist anymore. I say today as in the present of the Star Trek canon, not literally right now today. You guys get that, right? Point is, that is the premise of the show. At least part of it. This thing happened. Picard retreated away from everything. He left Starfleet. He went to live on his family's vineyard and hasn't really had much contact with anybody except for some of the Romulans that he managed to help before everything went just the worst way it possibly could have for a very long time, until a young woman who appears human but is actually an android that is in many ways a more sophisticated version of Data shows up asking for his help, and she doesn't seem to know who she is. And then, let's say, bad things happen to her, because I don't want to spoil anything unless I absolutely have to. And now Picard has to find her twin sister, Soji, who is working on a reclaimed Borg cube. I hope you guys know who the Borg are, even people who aren't that familiar with Star Trek. They're in the popular consciousness, right? There are a couple more things you have to know about the show in order to understand this theory as I'm going to present it. Picard's main goal, at least up until, and not the most recent episode, because this is going to go up after a 6th episode has aired, but I've only watched up to the 5th episode as of recording this. Up until the 5th episode, Picard's main goal has been to find Bruce Maddox, the guy who once tried to have Data declared the property of Starfleet so that he could be dismantled and reverse engineered into a slave race of sentient, super powerful androids, though, to be fair, Maddox didn't know that Data was sentient at the time, so it's not as bad as it sounds. They're trying to find him because he's the one who created the 2 super advanced human-like androids, and they need his help to know where the other one is. And also, he's just a really smart guy, and they have, like, his girlfriend / colleague, Agnes Girardi, on the ship with them, and she's very anxious to find him too, because she loves the guy. And something is obviously going on. Somebody definitely doesn't want him to be alive anymore, which sucks for him, and also the people who need his information to get where they're going. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to spoil a couple of things here, but first of all, those who haven't watched anything since the end of The Next Generation, I should probably catch you up on a couple of things. Data's dead. He died in the movie Star Trek Nemesis, the last movie to feature the Next Generation cast. He died returning Picard from the enemy ship, which was Romulan-ish. It was made by their sister species, the Remans, and was destroyed in an area near Romulan space. But he got Picard back from that enemy ship to the Enterprise and then stayed behind to destroy the ship's superweapon core, which was located on the ship's bridge for some stupid reason, because Nemesis was just really stupid, which destroyed the entire ship and saved the Enterprise and then by extension Earth, because that's where the ship was going next, but it killed Data in the process. And one of the other reasons that Picard seems to have retreated into himself so much is because he was trying to save the Romulans, because it was that event which led to the initial peace talks between the Federation and the Romulans, and he doesn't want to reduce the impact of Data's sacrifice, if that makes sense. In fact, he seems very hung up on the fact that Data sacrificed himself for Picard, to the point that part of the reason he tries to help the android girl, Dahj, when she shows up at his chateau, is because simply through extension of the technology used to create her, and based on the way she was designed based on a concept that Data had come up with for a potential daughter. He thinks of her as Data's daughter and feels obligated to help his friend's daughter. It's not the entire reason he wants to do it, because Picard's still a good guy, but it is at least part of the reason. Also, you need to know that there's some stuff from Star Trek Voyager that makes its way into this show. The Borg stuff I think of as a Voyager thing, because they dealt with the Borg more than anybody else. And there's a lot of Borg stuff in this, a lot of reclaiming of Borg technology. Also, Soji works in a facility located on a reclaimed Borg cube, as I mentioned before, where she works with the only known group of Romulans to be assimilated by the Borg, trying to help figure out why their brains went all wonky after something happened to their ship and they were freed from the collective. And we know it's not specifically because they were Romulans, because we've seen other assimilated Romulans, at least we the audience have. There was one in Star Trek First Contact, I think. There was a Romulan Borg in the Resistance movement in the Voyager 2-parter Unimatrix Zero, and one of the personalities that resurfaced within 7 of 9 of assimilated people who started taking over everybody, that was a weird episode, was also a Romulan. So we know there have been other Romulans assimilated by the Borg, but something about this group caused them to go crazy once they were linked together, and then caused the Borg to immediately, seemingly sever their link with them. And I think it was because of this woman here, who is a Romulan mythicist, who is aware of, apparently, the Romulans have a destroyer prophecy myth that they take very seriously, and that doesn't seem like a thing that the Romulans would do. It seemed kind of silly, but it's worth keeping in mind that in Star Trek there are canon entities who are able to see time from a perspective where past and future are like points on a plane rather than destinations on a river or whatever, however you want to put it. Effectively, they can see how history is going to play out before it does. The prophets from Deep Space Nine are a prime example of that. So it's not unheard of that there could be a literal prophecy of some kind of destroyer being in Romulan myth that is actually going to come true, or at least has the potential to. And the Romulans seem to take this very seriously, and I think that because this woman was part of that group assimilated by the Borg, something that she knew was run through the collective consciousness, and they saw it as dangerous and therefore cut her loose. And I say this, I'm talking about this, because I'm pretty sure that same dangerous thing, and we don't know what it is yet, we don't even have enough information yet to theorize really what it is, so that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. But whatever it is, I think that's what's driving the villainous Romulan group in Picard itself. This is a group even more secretive and dangerous than the Tal Shiar themselves. They're like a super Tal Shiar subgroup. I can't remember what they're called, and I wouldn't know how to pronounce it anyway. It's one of those weird words that every actor seems to say it differently. But I think that's what's driving the Romulans, and I think it's also the reason why we find out in Picard that this is the case. Romulans don't have AI. They never developed it. It seems almost like they've avoided developing it intentionally. Their computers aren't artificially intelligent. They've never tried to develop synthetic life forms of any kind. They don't deal in that kind of thing. And that's because seemingly the Destroyer is an artificial life form. In fact, the woman I mentioned before thinks that it's Soji. And whatever this Destroyer is going to do, it's serious enough that Agnes Jurati, the moment that she's alone with Bruce Maddox, a man that she loves, remember, she kills him in order to, I would assume, try and prevent whatever is going to happen from happening, because she realizes that he is on the side which his involvement will make it more likely to happen. I don't know, but she says something about having seen something that is making her want to do this, even though she doesn't want to do this. Like, I don't think she's a bad person, but she's definitely on the side of those Romulan agents in Starfleet. She was definitely recruited by them at some point. Some point very recently, but still, she was recruited by them, and that makes her a wolf in sheep's clothing, an enemy among the main cast of the show. Which kind of sucks. She's my favorite. We do know, though, and this is important, that she was only recruited recently, because she was clearly not trained to be an agent. She's not someone who was a plant from the very beginning. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She's only here doing what she's doing because whoever recruited her didn't really have another option. So we can infer that since Agnes was part of the same artificial intelligence research project that Maddox was involved in, that at the time of the synth attacks on Mars, they didn't have any agents in that project. Yes, that project has been largely shut down at this point, now that synthetic life forms are banned in the Federation. So it's possible that there was an agent in the group back then when the staff was larger, but for the purposes of this theory, I'm going to assume that there wasn't, because I would assume they would want that person to stay behind and make sure people like Maddox and Jurati weren't continuing their work in secret, right? And this is important because it means that the Romulans didn't have somebody there with access to the research that created those synths to use them and to help them know how to reprogram those synths to do what they did. Like, this is really sophisticated stuff. Even the less sophisticated version of Data, B4, that was used to create these synthetic life forms, was more advanced than what any general person can understand. The Romulans, if their intention was to stop this destroyer prophecy from happening by stopping the Federation from developing synths who are more and more advanced, seeing as how they don't have any actual knowledge of AI themselves to draw upon would have needed a source of that information, right? And while it's possible that their agents in Starfleet could have gotten that information for them, I think it's just as possible that the Romulans were able to get it for themselves, because I think the Romulans have data. Maybe not like a fully intact functional version of data, but at least some part of him. Because one of the things we did find out early on in Picard, the series, not the person, is that at least Bruce Maddox thinks this, and he is the foremost authority when it comes to androids like Data, who's still alive anyway. He thinks that Data's entire person could be reconstituted from a single one of Data's positronic neurons. So in theory, that's all that would have to survive the destruction of that giant ship, the Scimitar, in order for the Romulans to start to reverse engineer the technology that made Data. And if they're able to reverse engineer that technology, even if they don't pursue it, even if they don't reactivate Data because they are so afraid of this destroyer thing being a synthetic life form, it would at least give them the knowledge they needed to force an update to those synths on Mars and reprogram them for whatever purpose they had for them. And the reason I think this is because, first of all, the show promised us that Data was going to be in it. And yeah, he's been in Picard's dreams. This is Picard the person now and not the show. But he hasn't been in the show yet. And I don't feel like the showrunners would tease us like that. I don't think they would want the fans to be disappointed by Data not being in the show at all, in any form, because Data was a very popular character. He is my favorite Star Trek character overall still. So I do think the intention is for Data to be in the show in some way, shape, or form. And if Dahj and Soji were created based on Data's positronic neurons, then I guess technically he kind of already has been through them. But I think it's going to be more literal than that. I think Data, in some form or another, Data himself, is going to show up in the show at some point. Also, there's been some recurring elements in the show that make me think that this whole reclaiming of Data's technology by the Romulans is going to turn out to be a thing. There's the Romulans reclaiming Borg technology through the Borg cube. And also, I mentioned Star Trek Voyager. There was a plot in the most recent episode, that 5th episode that I mentioned before, where 7 of 9 from Voyager returns, and we find out that another fan-favorite Voyager character, Icheb, another ex-Borg, is dead, which really bummed me out. That he was... This is going to be kind of hard to hear. He was dissected and had his remaining Borg components removed, components that he needs to live, while he was still conscious, which... By God. And so I think that those things are in the show not just to make for compelling episodes and character motivations, but because they're setting us up for the reveal that the Romulans have similarly scavenged and reclaimed Data's technology from whatever was left of him after the Scimitar exploded. Not to mention that in the flashback where we see what happened to Icheb, something else happens too. 7 of 9, who was Icheb's surrogate mother, shows up, but she's too late to save him, and seeing that there's nothing she can do for him, and all that he has left to look forward to is a slow, painful death, she kills him. She kills him to spare him that. And if the Romulans do have Data, and if it is possible to recreate Data from even a single neuron, then there's always hope that Data could come back. But I think he's going to turn out to still be important to whatever the Romulans have planned. And that Picard is going to have to destroy what's left of him in order to stop that from happening. Not only would it parallel that scene between Seven and Icheb, since Data and Picard were also surrogate family to one another, the entire crew of the Enterprise D, the entire command crew at least, sort of felt that way about each other. But it would give Picard a chance to finally move past the fact that Data made that sacrifice for him and move on, by making the choice to let Data go once and for all. And if some people are right that this is going to be Picard's last mission, this is, again, still Picard, the person, he may even sacrifice himself in the process, bringing everything back around full circle and having him sacrifice himself to preserve Data's integrity by not allowing his technology to be used for evil purposes. In a way, sacrificing himself for Data as Data once sacrificed himself for Picard. Either way, though, what did you guys think of this theory? Do you think that the Romulans have Data in some form or another, and that if they do, there's the possibility that he could come back? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.